for a quick devar Torah.
Now a word from our sponsor, God.
That's right. Now a word from our sponsor. Again, this week's Parsha. One of the interesting things about Parshat Korach, it correlates to a lot of human history. Korach leads a rebellion against Moshe. He, with, again, logical complaints. This is, who appointed you over us? You appointed your brother to be the high priest. Isn't that nepotism? Shouldn't we be more democratic, elect our leaders? And it goes on. These are all logical complaints. Nothing that anybody can complain about. Of course, we know that he and his followers were all in it for themselves. Dotan and Aviram were not the two that you would choose to be on your team, because you know that the minute they had, the first chance they had, they'd stab you in the back. That's just the nature of the men. This correlates surprisingly with an event in British history, British naval history, the Mutiny on the Bounty. I'm sure you all know the story. Captain Bligh was a strict disciplinarian. They put into Tahiti and were there for a little while. The sailors liked the life on Tahiti, the women, etc., and they decided that they were not going to put up with Captain Bligh. So they had a mutiny. They put Captain Bligh and 18 of the ones who didn't want to be in the mutiny in a skiff. And meanwhile, they took over the bounty. They got some women. They went to Pitcairn Island. Christian Fletcher, the leader of the mutineers, burnt the ship because he didn't want any evidence of where they were. And also, he was also afraid that some of these guys might escape and go back, etc. And then what happened after that is interesting. Captain Bligh, in his skiff, overcrowded, no food or water, basically, managed to get these guys over 4,100 miles over open ocean, without, by the way, any navigational tools. And of the 18, only one died during the period. So in other words, he was able to command the skiff, etc., and bring them to safety. At his trial, his court-martial for losing the bounty, he was acquitted. He eventually rose to the rank, by the way, in the British Navy of Rear Admiral. Ended up as governor of New South Wales, where, again, his discipline got him into trouble. He tried to ban rum from the sailors, and was not a good idea. And they basically arrested him, and eventually he was acquitted, etc. But the point is he was a strict disciplinarian because he knew the men he was dealing with. The guys who served in the British Navy were not exactly the cream of society. As Churchill famously quipped, the British Navy was held together by, I think it's the whip. What? The lash, rum, and sodomy. Okay. Because when they discovered the mutineers on Pitcairn Island, most of them had died violently. They had nobody knows what happened to Christian Fletcher. We assume that he was killed. He did no. This was before movies. He did not win an Academy Award. But all joking aside, nobody knows what happened to him.
It became dog.
But and of the mutineers, a number of them, the few who were left, were taken back to England, where they put on trial, and most of them were hanged. There was one who was left on Pitcairn Island, and his name, believe it or not, was John Adams. Okay? Not the John Adams from America. This is a different John Adams. No, John Adams. But he seemed to have learned the lesson of the mutiny, because he became religious and actually made a stable society on Pitcairn Island. Uh, this is a good lesson that shows that the story of Korach is a lesson throughout history. You always have people who are rebelling against authority, and it always ends up in a disaster. The Tsar was no great leader, but what came after him was worse. Everybody knew that Germany needed a change in 1933, and they got a change. Just that the change they got was not what you would want. The point is yes, everybody wants change every so often, but you got to think about the change, and you got to think that the people running the show probably, in some cases, actually know what's best for the people they're dealing with. Moshe understood the Jewish people. He didn't want the job of being the leader. This was made clear, as I've mentioned. It took God something like 7 days to convince him to take the job. Imagine turning down God for 7 days. But, because God understood that this was actually the leader that we want. So it's very important that you have leaders who they'll do the job, but only because it's necessary for them to do the job, not because they want the job. And Joshua, after after Moses, he didn't want the job either, but he understood I have to be the leader because otherwise there's nobody else to do it, and we have to have a stable society. Otherwise, this whole project will implode on itself. Something to think about. Or one side?